All these fake alternatives are a bit like a recovering alcoholic standing up at AA and announcing, "That's it, no more wine for me, I'm going to stick to cider from now on." It's complete nonsense. Hello, it's Harriet Morris, the eating coach. I help my clients achieve up to a 95% reduction in their binge and compulsive eating and sugar addiction without feeling deprived or bad about themselves. So this week is the 5th anniversary of me saying no to sugar. Now, I didn't give up sugar 100%, but I gave up those foods that I call no stop button foods. So I'm talking about the cakes, the chocolate, the ice creams, and basically the desserts, because they were ruling my life and ruining my life. If I was even in mild stress, I would get in my car and I would drive to the supermarket, which was only a couple of miles away, and I would just stuff myself with family-sized dessert in the corner of the car park. And now I can go to that same supermarket, I can walk right down the dessert aisle, and it is as if there is an invisible shield between me and all that sugar. And the way I did it was not through drill sergeanting myself. It was not through willpower. It was through curiosity, through trial and error, and through really accepting that I was resisting this thing that I wanted so much, which was to give up sugar. So in today's episode, what I'm going to talk about is how sugar hijacks the brain. And when you understand this, I think it's going to take a lot of guilt off your shoulders about the relationship that you may well have with sugar, which is usually one of enslavement and guilt for many people. And I want to take that away from you today. So I will be talking about that later. It's a fascinating subject and something that very little is known about, really. But before that, we're going to start as always with Stupid Idea of the Week. This week's Stupid Idea of the Week is that honey is a healthy alternative to sugar. So, there is a TV celebrity here in the UK who, for the purposes of this rant, shall remain nameless. And she started off as a TV presenter, and then she brought out some workout videos and she shared loads of money from that. And then she moved on to her no sugar cookbooks. And I saw a quote from her the other day and she said, "I can't do Bake Off because I'm sugar free." Now, Bake Off, for those of you who are not in the UK, it's a reality show for cooks. It's kind of like MasterChef minus the testosterone and with a few more fairy cakes thrown in. So I just want to talk about this because this celebrity in her no sugar cookbooks uses honey. And this celebrity saying she is sugar free because she uses honey, it's a bit like an alcoholic saying, "That's it, I've given up wine, and from now on I'm going to stick to cider. I'm off the booze." It's complete nonsense. Just as cider is still alcoholic, even though it's not wine, honey will still mess up your brain chemistry and prevent you from managing your weight in the same way that sugar does. The only advantages honey has over sugar is that it has maybe a few more nutrients in it. But if you are trying to be healthy by eating honey, you're not going to do that, okay? But the thing is, I don't really want to just pick on this one unnamed celebrity, because there is an entire snake oil industry devoted to these fake healthy sugar alternatives. I'll give you another example. It's maple syrup, which is the staple ingredient in a cookbook of another very well-known get off sugar program. And it's complete nonsense. Let me repeat. Replacing sugar with maple syrup, it's like saying to somebody who is giving up smoking, right, you smoke Marlboro. I tell you what, we'll take that away. I'm going to give you Benson and Hedges instead. Well done, you've given up smoking. It doesn't work, people. So all the health food shops I have ever gone into, and I've gone into a lot, I can tell you, they are full of these fake healthy alternatives, and I can tell you that there are more apart from honey and maple syrup. And the thing that they do, which is very clever, is they price these tiny bars of replacements really quite expensively. And what they do, they promote this aura of well-being. It really, really smacks of the Emperor's New Clothes, don't you think? So what can you do? Is there no hope? Should you just never eat a sugar substitute that you buy in a health food shop? Should you just stick to boring old apples? Well, don't worry, because I've got a solution for you. What you need to do is to get my hidden sugars checklist. It's completely free. And what this is, it's a simple one-page PDF, and it'll help you translate those oh so lovely sounding ingredients, like I'll give you another one here, agave nectar. Okay, and what these are nutritional wolves in sheep's clothing. So this hidden sugars checklist, it's a bit like a lie detector you can print off, put in your pocket or your handbag and just take with you shopping, and it makes everything really, really simple. So if you want to get this checklist, just go to theshiftinside.com/hidden and get this, and I hope that helps you. And so with that, let's put the honey is healthy, maple syrup is healthy, agave nectar is healthy, myths all in the stupid idea of the week bin. Goodbye. Okay, so in the main section today, I'm going to talk about how sugar hijacks your brain and why this gives you the false idea that you actually have no control over sugar, that it may be something that you feel you can't do anything about. Because what's happening is that you believe that it's about sugar versus your willpower. And your willpower is the kind of place your willpower lives is your conscious mind. But what is really happening is that it's actually about your brain chemistry versus processed sugar, okay? And what is happening there. So I'll explain it all as we go along. So the reason that sugar messes us up and, is contributing to weight gain and may get you on a very up and down, moody instability, it may be affecting your hormones. It gives many women really terrible PMS or PMT, as you might know it, and they're not even aware of it. It's quite a big bugbear of mine, I must say. But what I'm going to explain all this as is as a roller coaster, and I'm going to explain what the sugar roller coaster is and give you some ideas for how you can get off it. Okay, so what I want you to do is to imagine a roller coaster here to explain this process. So I have a picture of this sugar roller coaster if you go to theshiftinside.com/hidden. And so you can have a look at that. But it's quite a simple diagram. So I'm going to explain it to you. So the way this works, if you imagine you're looking side on at a big roller coaster, you start off on the ground level and then it goes very steeply up and then very steeply down, and then it loops the loop, and then you're back on the ground. So this is how the sugar roller coaster works. So you start at the beginning where you're on the ground. So you get in the roller coaster and you start to go towards the big incline up. And this, where you got on the roller coaster, is what I call the trigger point. So the trigger point is where you're feeling tired, you're feeling low, you're bored, you're angry, or you have any unwelcome emotion. And you happen to see a sugary snack, or you happen to think about a sugary snack. And if you are in a state of addiction to sugar, you will very, very easily be able to start thinking of the sugary snack in response to the negative feeling that you're going through. So this is the start of the incline. And this point, the second point, is where dopamine comes into the picture. Now, let me just explain what dopamine is. You may well have heard of it, and it's bandied around, and people call it, like they call it, the happiness neurochemical. But this is not specific enough to understand the real power of dopamine. So dopamine, as I said, it's a neurochemical, and a neurochemical is basically a messenger that tells the brain and the nervous system to behave in certain ways for certain reasons. What the job of dopamine is to motivate you to take actions that your brain perceives are good for you. Okay, so for example, a stock market trader is often fueled by dopamine. It's the idea of, I take action now and then I will, make loads of money. But quite easily, a parent who wants their child to do really well in exams, and they make sure that their child sits down and does their homework and revises, and they encourage them, that is also dopamine. So let's not vilify dopamine. It's really important because it's like the motivational drug in your brain. So what is the point of all the dopamine flooding your system? It's to get you to the top of the roller coaster. The dopamine says, you see that sugar over there? That's going to make you feel good, because we know it's made you feel good when you felt bad before. So you get that now and you will feel good. And that is what's happening. It's not you being weak-willed or not being able to follow your diet or any other nonsense like this. All this is happening at a very, very primitive level. These neurochemicals have been around for thousands of years, and they are there for our survival. And it's much, much more powerful to your brain than your lofty goals, like I want to be such and such a size, or I want to have health. Dopamine is all about survival now, and it's coming from a very primitive part of your brain. So you should not feel bad when you feel that huge urge to go and get the sugar. So we go up on the roller coaster. You're going up very, very steeply now to the top, and this point is the point of serotonin. Now, you may have heard of serotonin as well. It's another neurochemical, so it's something else that the brain produces because it perceives that this is good for you. And again, all you've probably heard about serotonin is that, it's a happiness chemical, but it does a very different job to dopamine. So whereas the job of dopamine is to get you to take that action that will ensure you feel good, the serotonin is the feeling of security. Okay, so the S in serotonin stands for safety and security. And why we feel it is we feel serotonin to prove to our brains that we have done something that is good for us. So when we lived in tribes thousands of years ago and we were working for the good of the tribe, and the tribe accepted us and maybe moved us up in the hierarchy, our brains would be flooded with serotonin because we were working for the tribe, and the tribe was absolutely essential for our survival. And it's the same with food. When we were living in caves and we found some berries or some form of sugar in nature, our brains knew, first of all, that it's not poisonous, because the sweet taste tells us it's not poisonous, which is really good for our survival if we're cave dwellers. But it also says, calories, energy, this is going to keep you alive. So can you see that the dopamine gets you the urge to get the sugar, which gets you to the top of this roller coaster, and you have this feeling of serotonin, and your brain thinks, great, we might not see food for 5 days, we've got some energy now, that's fantastic, survival. And that is the amazing feeling of well-being you get just after you've bitten into that bar of sugar junk. Now, obviously, we are living in times where we have a surplus of all this food around and where the sugar has been processed. And this is very important, and I'll get to this later on, but the sugar has been processed. So what happens, the feeling of serotonin, the jump up from feeling low to feeling good, is too intense and it's too quick, because in nature, that sugar comes bundled up with fibre, because fruit has fibre in it. And what the fibre does, I will explain in a minute, but the fibre is very, very important. So there we are at the top of the roller coaster. We feel amazing. Our brains think, yeah, we're really secure. But as I said, it's too intense. And then we drop down. So imagine now you've got the very steep drop to the bottom of the roller coaster. And why does this happen? There are a couple of reasons. So the first reason that you have such an intense crash where you feel awful, you feel anxious, you feel low, you're back to where you were at the beginning. In fact, it's worse. I used to live on the sugar roller coaster, and even though I haven't been on it for 5 years, I will never forget that feeling, that awful feeling, and anxious and tension and everything. But what is happening? Okay, so what happens when you go very, very sharply up to the top of the roller coaster? Because the sugar is processed, you are flooding your system with too much glucose. And what the glucose does is it puts your body in a state of emergency, because it's not good to have so much glucose running around the bloodstream. And so your body says, right, we're in emergency now. We need our first responder. We need to call 999 or 911, wherever you may be. And that first responder is insulin. What insulin does is it's like a big pipe draining the blood of this flood of glucose, and the emergency is over. You are now safe. But what happens is that you've just had this huge amount of energy in the form of glucose, and then it's all gone. So your energy levels go right down. And one thing you'll notice about the sugar high, the top of the roller coaster, is that you feel you have a lot of energy. I'm sure you know what I mean. That's one thing that happens. You go down to the bottom of the roller coaster. And the other thing that happens is it's to do with your thinking and emotions. Now, what I have noticed amongst people I know and my clients is that some people regulate their emotions via food. And if you're listening to this podcast, you'll probably be one of them. So what this means is that if they are in disempowering situations, such as they're in a job that they feel they can't leave, or a really difficult marriage, and they have this feeling of worthlessness, of I am not enough, that serotonin hit of the sugar junk may be one of the only, or in some cases the only, source of pleasure for them. And that was very much the case for me. But because this hit of serotonin, it's just a hit, it's going to drop off very, very quickly. And because you have hijacked nature's process, which means you've had glucose in a processed form without the fibre, it's much higher, and then you fall much lower. So all the energy of the glucose is drained away fast. And on top of this, your serotonin has dropped off dramatically. And if you have not got a level of happiness that is making you feel like you're quite good in your normal everyday life, then you're going to feel really, really awful. And so you know what this crash is. It's anxiety, it's fatigue, it's anger, depressed feelings, irritability, hopelessness. I remember that one really, really well. And then we move on to the loop. Now, if you have a sugar blowout once in a while, you don't have to worry about this loop. And in fact, the way that it works for virtually all my clients is that they don't give up all these desserts completely. They might have them occasionally, or they might have a little bit every week. But if you just very rarely go out and you have a big sugar blowout, it's no biggie. It's absolutely no biggie. It just depends on if you can manage that or not. But for many, many people, what happens is that they don't just have the odd blowout. They are on this roller coaster, often on a daily basis. But as I say, for many people, it's just very easy to just get back on the sugar roller coaster because they don't have enough sources of pleasure or satisfaction in their life. So what happens is that they keep looping the loop. So they're always going high and they're always crashing. And there are a couple of effects of this. And the main one I want to talk about here is insulin resistance. So you may have heard that if you are continually flooding your bloodstream with all the glucose and the insulin has to come and get it, imagine those first responders, imagine like the fire crews or the ambulance people, imagine they didn't have, one emergency maybe every day. I don't know how the emergency services work, but imagine like you had a really bad emergency once a day and then you had some time to recover. Imagine you now had 5 really bad emergencies a day and you weren't getting enough sleep and you were under a lot of stress and there was no respite. This is actually what you're doing to insulin when you are having processed sugar all the time. And what happens is that the insulin says, I'm knackered, mate. And you start to need more and more insulin to drain off the same amount of glucose. And after a while, insulin stops being able to do its job. And that is where you start insulin resistance. That is where you begin the royal road to obesity, diabetes. Dr. Mark Hyman in the United States, he calls it diabesity, which would be quite funny and witty if it wasn't so damn tragic. Just this feeling of inability to change because it's this hopelessness and it's this feeling of being controlled by sugar, which is actually just your dopamine and serotonin reactions being hijacked, that just leads you to feel that you can't change anything. And just for you ladies out there, one thing that the loop creates that you may well not be aware of is premenstrual tension. Sugar really affects women's hormones. And I think it was Mark Hyman again, and he said, why is it that people just accept that 25% of your month should just be given over to feeling angry and tearful and really low and really bad about yourself? For many women, premenstrual tension is a optional extra to their life that they don't need to have. Okay, you don't need to believe me when I'm saying this. You just need to try going 1 month without sugar, because it was that got me off sugar, that I was in such a terrible state. What happened with me was that my PMT was so terrible that was what made me just do this one experiment. I thought I'll just go 1 month without sugar and I will see if that affects everything. And it changed my life. I have no more problems whatsoever in this area. And I am a 46-year-old woman. So while everyone else is like, under the yoke of feeling awful once a month and, dreading their menopause, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I am free of this because of the work I did around my sugar addiction. And so after you've done the loop, you go back and you're at this low point. And what I call this is your life on the roller coaster. So this is the net result of continually riding this roller coaster every day. Not just the emotional, cognitive and hormonal disturbances as described above, but the long-term health risks that insulin resistance and other things feed into your system, chocolate bar by chocolate bar and dessert by dessert, type 2 diabetes, obesity, dental problems, and then just the feeling that you are just really neurotic and over emotional. And again, I would talk about this general feeling of helplessness. So your addiction is not down to laziness or an inner defect. You are not just neurotic. You are not just naturally anxious. So, how do you get off the sugar roller coaster? I'm going to talk very quickly about this, and I will come back to this. So instead of a roller coaster, I want you to imagine a children's caterpillar ride. So you've seen them at the fun fair. It undulates up and down, and it just goes round and round. And 3-year-olds ride this thing. You never get very high, and there are no sharp drops either. And there are different ways to do this. You can achieve this. The main way you achieve this is by making your main sweetener fruit, because the fibre in fruit slows down that very intense action of the glucose flooding the bloodstream. It just makes it happen much more slowly. It's like a flood defense mechanism for glucose. You don't have this intense rise, and you don't have this intense fall. So you can't have insulin resistance. So you can't have this very low feeling that makes you just run back to the next bar of chocolate. Now, fruit is boring. Are you saying that? Are you saying to me fruit is boring? Well, some fruit is boring, but there are ways to eat fruit that are far more interesting. And I will leave it there, but we will come back to this in future episodes. So thanks for listening today. If you have any questions, just email me info@theshiftinside.com. I hope this has been helpful, and I will speak to you next week. And I'll just give you once more that web address for the Hidden Sugars checklist. It's theshiftinside.com/hidden. So thanks for listening. I'll speak to you next week.